and the missionaries picked us up and took us to the mission home, and that was really exciting and fun. We met with Sister Brockbank and Brother Brockbank, and they welcomed us in, and we spent the first night in the mission home. And then the next day, they gave me an elder to go out and start doing missionary work with, which, of course, is the right thing to do. And I went out with him, and we were talking to people, and the problem was he could understand their language, and I could not understand anything that they were saying. And finally, when we got through talking with the first lady, we pulled back, and as we left, I said, "I'm awfully sorry, Elder, but what language was she speaking?" And he looked at me and he said, "English." I said, "That didn't sound anything like English I ever heard before." And he said, "All of us feel that when we start, but it's not a foreign language mission, though there's a bunch of words which are not in English, and they're still Gaelic, but they just sewed those in. But the problem is they have what they call a brogue here, and so you'll get onto it. Just hang in there." And so we did. And my first companion was Elder Wayne Kuhn, and he was a fantastic missionary. We just had a wonderful time together. He was fantastic. He could play a guitar and a banjo. Now, you have to understand, restrictions were not what they are now. Restrictions were pretty few. And so they took musical instruments with him, and that was the way he got started with talking with the people. We would go play with the children at the park, and then, which we could do then, which they can't do now. Uh-huh. And then we would go to their homes with the kid and knock on the door, and of course the mom would answer the door, and we'd say, "My companion and I are elders from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We've been playing with Ian down at the park." She said, "I know you have." I said, "We thought maybe you'd like to just know who we are and kind of what we're doing here and what we believe. Is it possible we could come by and see you?" She said, "Absolutely." They all said that. Absolutely. I said, "Well, we could do it in the evening when your husband's home." We're all there. I said, "Yes." "When would that be convenient? How about tonight?" Sure. Is 7 o'clock good? 7 o'clock's great. Come right here at 7 o'clock. We'll be waiting for you. And so we would arrive, and he would get saltwater taffy from home. His mom sent him pounds and pounds, and that was very expensive with the air flight, because it came, in the airplanes. But she sent him pounds and pounds of saltwater taffy from Salt Lake. So he'd give out saltwater taffy, and then he would have the most entertaining family home evening with them, playing on the guitar, and then when they got him really happy and enthused and excited, then he pulled out the banjo. It's kind of like, when Madison Libby, who plays the violin so very well, she'll play some wonderful classical pieces, and people just, they're really drinking it. She's so good. And then she fiddles. And it's like the devil went down to Georgia. It's fantastic. It just stands you on your toes, It's fantastic. And then she goes back to a little classical thing at the end. But she's got it in there somewhere. That thing really can talk to you. Uh-huh. But that's what he could do with that banjo. Because with the banjo, it has a whole lot more personality than a guitar. A guitar is kind of an accompaniment instrument, right? A banjo is the whole thing. And he was really good at it. He had worked in a music store before he went on his mission, because he played the guitar and the banjo, I guess, for years, and was really good. And it was really fun having him for a companion. And he was a great one to teach me how to do the missionary work. And we just had a wonderful time. Just exciting, fun time.
And what was his name one more time?
His name was Owen Wayne Kuhn. C-O-O-N. Yeah, C-O-O-N. And that was Elder Kuhn, and he was super. My next companion was Val Johnson, and he was a medical student who had stopped his medical training to come on his mission. Unfortunately, he was smarter than anything. It was awful. We would get up in the morning, because you get up early, and he would get up and get dressed and shave and all the stuff. He'd sit in the chair. He'd read his book for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then he'd just close his eyes and snooze in the chair. After about 4 or 5 days, I said, Elder Johnson, we're really supposed to be studying during this time. He said, Elder McOmber, what is your scripture for the day that you've memorized? And I'd go through it. He said, what was yesterday's scripture? And I'd say, oh my goodness. And I'd work my way through it because, and then 3 days ago, and I was working out, and he said, I'll give you the last 5. And he just rattled them off, just bing, 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 bing. I said, okay. He said, we'll just count this contemplation time. And if I snore, it's okay. I have them down, don't I? I said, yes, you do. He said, good. There we were. And so he became the branch president. I was his counselor. We did stuff, and he was very good. When I was having Howard Joseph, I should say, when Elizabeth was having Howard Joseph, he was, I guess, an intern at the hospital when we arrived with Howard. And I said, Val, Brother Elder Johnson, how are you doing? All that stuff. And we were chatting, and Elizabeth said, Howard, I think we're here for a special reason. And he looked over and said, McOmber, she's having a baby right now. I said, yeah. He said, we're going to get her a wheelchair real fast, and we're going to push her up, and thank you very much. And we hauled her off. It was good. But anyway, it's just little funny things. But we had a great time. We enjoyed our mission. It was exciting. Just teaching the people. We were in East Kilbride, and I was there for 10.5 months. I started off in the branch presidency with Louis Gaboin. Then when Louis Gaboin was called to be a district president, then Val Johnson became the branch president. Then I became the branch president, and I stayed as the branch president until I left at 10.5 months later. I mean, I've been in that area 10.5 months, and it was wonderful. The people were great. Everything was just super. One of the little stories we had with Elder Kuhn, I had made a faux pas with the people we were staying with. We stayed with people. We had digs. They called them digs. And you stayed with people, and they fed you, and they put you up, and you lived there in one of their bedrooms, and you ate with them. And that little place in the Charles Dickens story of where the kid says, Oliver Twist says, could I have more? That was a bad thing, got him in all kinds of trouble. And I said the same thing, not being very sharp or wise or worldly or knowing anything or just not that smart. Mm-hmm. And I said, could I have some more? And the lady was put out and not pleased. And we were going to have to move out of there. And I said to Elder Kuhn, I guess we better go find us another set of digs. He said, I guess we do. And I said, let's take a look. He said, well, we have to do our missionary work first, and then we'll do what we... And I said, we have to have a place to stay. He said, and we have to do our missionary work, so come with me. I said, all right. So we went to a lady who was there, and her husband. They were investigators, and we told them our predicament. And she said, well, you can stay here with us. Harry and me, we can put you up. Her name was Jeanette, and her husband's name was, oh, goodness. It just slipped out of my mind. I had it saying, anyway, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we were there, and so she invited us in, and then that was a great thing. It was really fun. She fed us beautifully. They were just so sweet. Wonderful. Harry was his name. So Harry and Jeanette, we were just having a great time. But one breakfast, she looked at us, and we'd been there for, I guess, a couple of months, and she said, okay, why don't you like me? I said, Jeanette, we love you. She said, no, you don't. We said, yes, we do. She said, no, you don't, and I can prove it. And we said, okay. And she said, do you teach the gospel to people that you love? And we said, sure. And she said, since you moved in here, you haven't taught me anything about the gospel. And I expect that if you love me, you'll teach me the gospel. We said, okay, when would you like to learn it? She said, as soon as I get the dishes done for breakfast, we'll do it. So she cleared the dishes away. We went and got our little flannel board that we used. And we sat there. Now, in those days, we memorized 6 discussions. And the person's name that was in the discussion was Mr. Brown. And I renamed several Scots Mr. Brown, and sometimes they'd say, my name is Mackenzie, and so I learned not to use Brown when I practiced.
That's a good idea.
With a regular, I'd use Campbell, I'd use anything but Brown, because I had renamed a couple of people, and they took a little umbrage that I couldn't remember their name. Because I was doing it. Anyway, we were there, and I was teaching her, and she said, hold it. You didn't do that right. I said, what do you mean I didn't do it right? I said, you're supposed to ask da-da-da-da-da. Then I say D-T-D-T-D, and then you say da-da-da-da-da, and you missed that. I said, Jeanette, how do you know? She said, because I've studied your stuff. I said, you've already read it. You've already studied it. You already know it. I said, yeah. I said, well, why am I teaching? He said, because it's your job to teach me. I can't get baptized until you have taught me the gospel, and you'd better get onto it. And so Elder Kuhn, that time Elder Kuhn had moved on, and we had Elder Bowles with me. No, I think it was still Elder Kuhn. So Elder Kuhn and I were there, and so, make a long story short, we baptized her.
There you go.
It was very nice and all that stuff, yes, but it was one of those funny things. When Elizabeth and I went back on that wonderful trip that your folks set me up on to go back to Scotland, we were going around with Brother Smith, and we stopped out in front of their house. I thought that he'd stopped for a reason. He just pulled over to check his bearings. And I said, right there, the apartment complex was called Little Grove. I said, right there in Little Grove, right that apartment you see over there, okay, that's where Jeanette and Harry put us up, and that's where I lived for about 3 or 4 months. And he looked around and he said, I didn't know. I said, I thought you stopped here just so I could show this to Elizabeth. He said, I stopped to get my bearings. The Lord's running this show. But it was. The Lord ran the whole show when we went back to visit or anything else. But it was just exciting. And we had lots and lots of wonderful experiences. We had a lot of fun with the kids. We did lots of exciting things. As missionaries, we were new. The church was brand new in Scotland. The members who'd been there in a long time were 3 and 4 months into the church, 5 and 6 months, because most of them were baptized in the first 3 years, and they had just set that up in that area. We were still setting them up. We baptized an awful lot of folks and built a lot of branches. And that first summer, President David O. McKay came over to organize the first stake in Scotland. And that was a really exciting meeting. I must say, I have felt the Spirit at many other times, but I've never felt it quite like that. I was there, and one of the ladies, Sister McDonald, who was taught by a fellow named Hugh B. Brown? Ricky Bell. Anyway, he baptized her. He learned the deaf language so he could teach her the gospel. Now, I didn't speak the deaf language, but according to Sister McDonald, she could read my lips better than any other person she'd seen. So she said, why don't you just repeat what he says, and I'll watch your mouth and I'll know what he's saying. So we did that through the meeting. It was an exciting meeting. He was there. The Spirit was very powerful. And the elders that he served with, who'd long since died, were there too, and he pointed them out. He had the elder so-and-so, and elder so-and-so, and elder so-and-so, and elder so-and-so are here with us today, because he could see them there. Kind of one of those things that was really great.
Yeah. The
power was just fantastic. And he said, I didn't know that I would live long enough to see a stake in Scotland. And here we are, and it was a stake, and it was wonderful. And we felt very, very blessed. It's a very exciting thing. We had so many of those. I had, when I was there in East Kilbride, one of my other very, life, there's certain experiences in your life that are sort of, they're either turning places or they're moments of a rendezvous point in your path down the straight and narrow. This is where you make a real commitment, really deep. So we were part of the Castle Milk District. We had 6 elders from East Kilbride, and they had about 8 from Castle Milk, which was a neighboring area. And we all got in the van, because in those days, President Broadbent said, I would really appreciate it if you guys would get out of town on Monday. I don't want you hanging around in your areas, because those folks need to look at you as though you are the ministers that you are, in your suits and your behavior and everything else. And then when you let your hair down on Monday, it's not a good thing. So just leave. Go see the castles. Go see whatever you can. You'll see things here you can't see any other time. So go do it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we were doing. And we were going up there to Perth and Dundee. And as we were going up there, we were all crammed in that little minivan. I mean, we had, I think, 14 guys in that minivan. And I was a kid from Idaho and used to being active. And I felt very cramped. So when we got up to a place that was beautiful, they stopped and opened the door. And I jumped out, and all of us got out. And I just ran. It was just wonderful. To remind me of in Pocatello, where we'd run down the foothills there, and they had little areas there where we'd go down kind of fast, and the CCC guys had dug trenches and little plateaus in it, so we'd run down and jump on the plateaus. Well, this is a natural one. As I ran along, it was grass, it was beautiful, and then there'd be a drop-off, and I'd run and jump off the drop-off, and I'd go drop down about 4 or 5 feet, land and run on, and then do it again, and then do it again, and it was just wonderful. And then the Spirit said, stop, and so I stopped and looked over the next jump, and it was about, I think, probably 500 feet down. I couldn't even see the sides of the cliff. I could see the tops of the trees way down there.
Wow.
And so I slowly backed away from the edge where I was about ready to, in exuberance, jump out. I'd have jumped, and that had been the last anyone would have heard of me. But the Spirit stopped me right there. And I came back. None of the other elders knew anything about it, nor do I think they know anything about it to this day. But I knew. I came back, and we had a little prayer with the Lord, and I committed myself to Him and gave Him my life and thanked Him that I still had one to give Him. And it's just like it was yesterday, and it was, 60 years ago. But it was just one of those situations that I'll always remember, that running, and then that stop from the Spirit. And I stopped, and He didn't stop me too early. He stopped me right there. Oh, my goodness. And the Lord is good to us, isn't He?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one of those things. We did a lot of exciting things. We put on stuff. Elder Kuhn was a showman, and they thought we would have road shows like we had back home in Utah and Idaho, where each ward would get a show together, and then we would go to each other's wards on a particular night. Usually do 2 or 3 nights of it. And we would go and put on shows for the people in the other buildings, and we all just had a great time, and it was a great idea. So we did that. And when we were doing that, Elder Kuhn went over to the town, because we didn't have a church at that time. We were meeting in a school. And he hired he rented the town hall. So he rented the town hall, and he rented speaker equipment and everything else. And I said, how are we doing this? He said, we don't worry about it. We just do it, and then we send a bill to President Broadbent, and he pays it. And I said, the church pays? He said, no, President Broadbank pays. It's no big thing.
Wow.
What is this? That's how they did it. That's what he did. President Broadbank was a very successful real estate tycoon in Salt Lake, and he just did lots of stuff. He personally supported, I think, 40 missionaries that were Scottish out of his own pocket on the mission, and he went out and bought church sites for our buildings in his own name with his own check. He bought 23 of them. He said if they knew who I was and what I was doing it for, they'd never sell it. However, they're willing to sell to a real estate man from America. They're happy to take our money, and so I can buy these sites. So he did. He bought those sites, and they built buildings on them. He did all kinds of stuff. He took us once, just this generosity. He took us down to the London Temple. He said everybody has to pay £5. You have to throw the money in because we're renting buses here, and we'll be having a meal on the way and stuff. So we all dutifully put in our £5. I had no idea how much £5 was compared to what we were going to do. £5 wouldn't have been a down payment on the trip, but we didn't know those things. So we went down and we stopped at a restaurant. This was the fanciest restaurant I'd ever been in my life. One of the fanciest ones I've ever been in to this day. It was fantastic. You had a waiter right there to take care of you. And they put your napkin on your lap, that sort of thing, and had anything that you wanted right there. They were just at your beck and call. The food was fabulous. I have a feeling that dinner was a whole lot more than £5, just the dinner. But he just kind of did that. He sort of just bankrolled things because he had it, and he felt that was the right thing to do, and he had 385 missionaries. And he did a feeling for that.
Wow.
And he went down and he put us up for a couple of days at the church had a couple of buildings where we could stay, and we stayed there and went to the temple, and it was an extremely exciting time. And that's the first time that they had movies in the church, because everything else, of course, is live. All the temples ran live, but London didn't, because they didn't have a staff of people who could be the actors to do it. And so the church had put the endowment on film with nobody speaking. And then they filled in the speaking when they got to the temple, so it was kind of neat. So we got it. That was the first time I'd seen one, but it was very interesting. It was good. We had a wonderful old temple president. Just an exciting thing. It was just wonderful. It was new. The church was new there, and it was exciting, and the people were ready for us. We could teach the gospel. We baptized 14,000 people in 3 years. That's a European mission. That meant we baptized more than everybody in Mexico and South America put together every month. All those missions put together, we baptized more than they did. We baptized also more than all the European missions put together, because the people were ready. One day, the mission president for Germany showed up in Renfrew to the mission home with President Broadbank, unannounced. They just walked in. And President Broadbank said, "Well, hello." He said, "I've come to see how you do it. None of us get that. I brought my 10 best missionaries with me." And he said, "Wonderful." He said, "I don't know how you do it, Bernard. I mean, you baptize hundreds every month." He said, "Yeah, we do." And he said, "I'll tell you what. I'll put your missionaries out with mine, and they can see what it is. Just kind of a little mentoring thing. Would that be all right?" He said, "Wonderful." Those missionaries were so sharp. 2 of them came to East Kilbride. They were wonderful missionaries. I think that the ones that worked in East Kilbride maybe had more baptisms in the 2 days they were with us than the 2 years that they were in Germany, or 2.5 years in Germany.
Wow.
Because our people were ready. and they baptized in the Allen family. And so they baptized in a family in Scotland on their mission. Not being called to Scotland, not even having permission from anybody anywhere. They just showed up, and the Lord helped them to see it. The truth was, the difference was they were fabulous missionaries, but the Germans were not as prepared as the Scots were. The Scots were prepared at that time to hear the gospel. That was the Lord. He did it. And you know what our front door was?
What?
The greatest evangelical leader in the history of the United States. And his name has just slipped me out. I'm having that problem. Then it will come to me in a second. It just takes a little while.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, anyway, he had come to Scotland on a crusade. He did crusades everywhere. And he talked to people about Christ and the importance of coming to Christ and what his church was and all that, and being part of the kingdom of God, and just got them all fired up. And then he left. And the Scots were really excited about coming to Christ. And obviously the Church of Scotland was not it. They knew that. So when we came and knocked on the door, they let us in. And they talked to us. I was there. I arrived in Scotland on May 1st. It was sometime in July before anybody closed the door in my face in Scotland, knocking on doors, attracting. That was the first time anyone ever shut the door when I was doing my little talk. And I was ready to knock on that door, and Elder Wayne Kuhn said, Elder McOmber, just step back a little. He doesn't know who we are. He thinks we're book salesmen. So don't you worry. So I don't think this is the way they should treat us here. He said, I know, and just let that go. There are missions where they have a hard time getting in all day. So it better not start in Skysted. We'll just forgive him and go on. And so we did.
Oh, was it Billy Graham? Is that what the name was?
Graham, yes, it was Billy Graham.
That's what it was.
And so Billy Graham opened the door. He was our front door he was the lead of our softening the hearts of the people ahead of us. Now, Billy Graham was never really pro-LDS, but he was pro-Jesus. And the things that he said were very good and very true, and they rang with the people. And when we came, they could feel the Spirit on us, and they accepted us. And so that was pretty exciting. That was one of those things that just interesting. But the Scots were ready. The field was white, all ready to harvest. All the pieces were in order. And so we had a wonderful time. And that was a great mission to be on. I mean, we just had all kinds of excitement and fun. Now, unfortunately, the elders who were over in Ireland were having a little different experience. It was a little tougher over there and other places, but ours was just super. Of course, they had a great mission president over there. His name was Stephen Covey. And he had a full head of hair back then, and he was a young man with a young family, and they called him over, and he was a fabulous speaker. I told you about that, didn't I? Mm-hmm. About being there at the mission and having all the general authorities there, or did I tell you that? Well, I'll tell you now again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we'd have conferences for the members, and because we had so many apostles and general authorities running missions, they would come up and speak. We had a guy named Brother Hanks, who was fantastic. Marion Hanks would come and talk to us. Elder Peterson would come and talk to us. Nathan Eldon Tanner would come and speak. We had Stephen R. Covey. He was no slack of a speaker. He would speak, and Brother Brockbank was very sweet. He was much better in a small group, but he would speak, and his wife. And then when we would get through with all these fantastic speakers, they were wonderful, so kind of like going to conference, a general conference. It's just really great. And I'd go down to the Scots afterwards, and I'd say, because it was just fun to do it, I'd say, "Oh, what'd you think of that? Oh, Elda, It was great. And I say, yeah. Did you learn anything? Oh, fabulous. I said, and which speaker was the best? He said, Sister Brockbank, of course. They always said the whole thing. Everyone I asked, there was no change, and they said the whole thing. Sister Brockbank, of course. Of course. Of course, she was better than anybody else. Stephen Covey was not in the same room with her. She was so much better than Stephen Covey. And I thought the problem is that they haven't been raised in the church. You're supposed to know that the general authorities are better speakers than the mission president's wife. But they weren't trained right. So they just spoke the truth that was in their heart. And of course, it was true. Sister Brockbank led with her heart. She was fabulous. She was everybody's mama.
That's awesome.
And everybody, just fantastic. I think Elizabeth could have done a great job, though. Elizabeth had a lot of pizzazz, and she led with her heart very well, and could hold a crowd in her hand. But Sister Brockbank was really, really something. Nada Brockbank. Whenever you went to the mission home, she made you feel like you were just the most welcome guest in the world. And just all the things, just whatever. She was just phenomenal.
That's awesome. Granddad, I'm thinking about it, and I think that you've had a lot of amazing, influential women in your life.
Oh, yes. The Lord has blessed me tremendously with the women that I've had in my life.
Definitely. So we can get back to the mission now, though. Sorry, that was just a random thought.
Oh, that's just very good. Anyway, so we served. I had a great time. I was a senior companion after Elder Johnson. I had two senior companions. Then I was a senior, and my first junior companion was Elder Alan Bowles. When we got back, he became a bishop pretty quick and became a stake president and all kinds of good stuff. But he's passed away. But he was up here. He was the stake president of Auburn. He was called to be stake president when he was 39 years old. And he was my first junior companion. And we had all kinds of companions and all kinds of stuff. And Scotland was great, and East Kilbride was great, and I was the branch president, and we had so many experiences, so many wonderful experiences. And then President Brockbank came to something we were doing, and he pulled me aside and said, Elder McOmber, would you do anything that I asked you to do? I said, absolutely. I will do whatever you ask. He said, how would you like to be a junior companion? I said, I'd love it. Whatever you want from me, I'll do it. He said, good, you're going to be a junior companion. I said, okay. Delighted. And he said, we have an elder that won't leave an area. He won't leave. He says that there's someone there that the Lord's told him he has to bring into the church, and he feels so strongly about it, and when I pray, it's true. So he's been without a companion, living in his digs for 3 weeks.
Wow.
So you're going to be his companion. I said, I will be there. And so the next day I went to Loch Lomond. It's a beautiful place. Loch Lomond's wonderful. And he had a place. He was living there in Balloch, which is right on the loch. And so I met him. He's a wonderful kid from St. George. Actually, he's from a suburb of St. George, Santa Clara. But anyway, he was good. And after breakfast the next morning, I said, now, I understand that you feel there's someone here that you need to bring into the church. He said, there is, Elder McOmber. I know it. I know it in my soul. And I have looked everywhere. I said, well, where have you looked? He said, everywhere. There isn't a stone unturned out there. I've tracked it through every one of these little towns around here. I've tracked it like crazy. I've done all that I can, and I can't find this person. I said, what happened when you tracked at our street? He said, what? I said, when you tracked at our street. He said, well, I didn't track this street. We live here. I said, how about we start here? So he went out. Second door. First door, nobody answered. The second door, Sheila Morgan answered the door. Sweet lady, my goodness. She had her master's degree in art, and she was just a sensitive, wonderful, beautiful person. And she invited us in, and made us feel so welcome. We taught her a first and a second discussion. There were only 6 discussions. We taught 2 to her that day, and she gave the closing prayer. And it was, the power was there. It was one of those things. Mm-hmm. And to make a long story short, her husband was the most, he was an economic number one bull in the herd. He ran the lumber works, the lumber yard and the sawmill and all the stuff that hired most of the people. It was the biggest, sort of like the head of Boeing here. It was that sort of thing. That was it. He drove a big black Jaguar just like our mission president did. He had everything in the world. And when President Haight would go around, he'd take this guy with him just because it was so neat and he could bear his testimony. And Brother Morgan was someone with real stature, in the area. It was kind of nice. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there was somebody that Jan Graff had to bring into the church because the Lord wanted that couple to come in because they did wonderful things. And they were very influential. And then I went back when your dad sent me up to go back to Scotland with Elizabeth, and I thought, we'll go find them. And so he went back to Loch Lomond, and I knocked on the door, and there was nobody there. And so I went next door. I still remember the lady's name. It was Baxter. And I said, Mrs. Baxter, I'm Elder McOmber, and 20 years ago I came here, and I was going to give you a copy of the Book of Mormon then, but I didn't do it, but I've got one for you now. And I gave it to her, and I said, and we were trying we wanted to meet again with Sheena Morgan, who lives next door. She said, son, Sheena died like 18 years ago. I said, oh, okay, that's probably why we haven't heard from her. She said, might be.
Yeah.
And so, they were not young. And so that was what happened. So we didn't get to see Sheena, though I think Sheena maybe saw us. So that was just part of the exciting things. And she had a friend. Now, Sheena Morgan was at the tip top of the socio-economic group of the Vale, of the whole area. And our members were from the lowest slum in the whole area. They were from Jamestown. They refer to it as Jameson. Kind of, and it doesn't sound it with a Scottish brogue. And so she came to church. We had her come to church with her friend. And I thought, we'll see how this works out. Because the rest of them were pretty scruffy. And she doesn't ever seem to notice that anybody was scruffy. She just, as though they were all the same. And so it was Sister McIntyre who was with her. And so they just, they were just sweet ladies. Fantastic. Sister McIntyre had the biggest German Shepherd I ever saw. I know it was a German Shepherd. It was probably purebred, but the thing was as big as a timber wolf. It was giant. And went along with her very sweetly, and we all knew, and he let us all know, I'm here as her guard dog, and as long as you're nice and she likes you, I'll let you live. That was just kind of how it was. And she had a little boy, and she had an interesting story. She and Sheila met after Sheila had met with us. Then she and Sheila met, and they were very good friends. What's that? Oh.
Dinner's on the table.
Okay. Anyway, they had some. I'll tell you about her baptism. Okay. We challenged Sister McIntyre to be baptized. We took him up to Saki Hall, which is the baptismal font in Glasgow, at the Glasgow ward, because we had wards then. And they had a font in their church, and she looked at it and she said, no, that's not where I'm going to be baptized. I'm sorry, elders, but it's not it. And so she said, I know where I'm going to be baptized. I've already seen it. And then when Sheila Morgan got baptized, we baptized her at High Blantyre because something had happened. Sankey Hall was closed. Something happened to their father, something. So we couldn't baptize there. So we went to one of the mansions that they made into a church in one of the little suburbs just on the outside of Glasgow. And we went in and we were baptizing. I think we were baptizing Sheila at that time. And Sister McIntyre said, "Oh, this is it. This is the place I'm going to be baptized. This is what I saw." We said, "Wonderful. We could do that." So she was baptized too, in the right place, because that's where she had seen she was going to be baptized. And when Elizabeth and I went back that 20 years later, Sister McIntyre's son was the bishop of the ward down there, down at Dumbarton. So kind of neat, you know.
Very.
Now she'd received her first discussions though in Australia. She'd been in Australia, and I don't know if her husband died or if they got a divorce. But she and her boy came to Scotland, and she just had him. And then she had the good friends were the Morgans. And then I got transferred, my second and last transfer into Parkhead. And so I kind of lost track of them because I was down in Glasgow and they were out in Loch Lomond. So I didn't know much else until we went back, and Sheila Morgan was already gone. But Sister McIntyre's son was the bishop of the ward down in Dumbarton, which is all the same area. So, how about that? Just those little things. And then we just had a lot of fun. I just enjoyed that so much. We had a time, though, that I probably told you this, and you're going to be bored with it. But
no, I have not been bored once, and I will not be bored. I promise. I love hearing these stories, even if I'm hearing them again.
Okay. They sent me a companion there when I was in Jan Graff got another junior companion, and I got a junior companion, and then I was placed in charge of the elders. So I was under the direction of Brother Graff, and then I was his leader, which happens at the church all the time. So I was the branch president and also in charge of the missionaries and kind of did everything in Loch Lomond. And we had things going on. So I had Elder Condor, Jan Graff, and his companion was, I think, Elder Green. And there we were, four of us doing a missionary work. And it, like I said, a lot of the people in our ward were kind of scruffy. And the girls came to us, the young ladies in Mutual came to us and said, "Elders, we need to warn you, the common Charles are going to come to Mutual next Wednesday, and they're going to rough you up. And if they're going to stop what we're doing here." And I said, "I'll tell you what, I want you to tell all just our people, come on Friday night. We're going to have our Mutual on Friday night, but don't let the word out to anybody else, and we'll take care of this other." And she said, "It's the common Charles." Now there was common Charles where they had a movie out, and there was the bad guys in the movie were the common Charles, which were Comanches working with some really bad guys and doing all kinds of awful stuff and terrorizing and doing awful things. And these guys called themselves the common Charles, and they went around doing that too. They ran a protection racket and stuff and burned down people's barns and did mischief and stuff. They were bad guys, and they were coming to shut us down. And I knew we couldn't run, but I'd been against worse situations than them. Common Charles are one thing, Hispanics are a whole lot tougher. So the four of us, I told the elders, we have no choice. We will meet them here. And so we did, and they started coming. They came, 3 and 4 and 2 at a time sort of thing. So we got about half a dozen or a dozen of them to start with there. And they looked us over. Now, 3 of us were over 6 feet. But Rodney Condor wasn't. He was about 5'10". a lot like you, built a lot like you, with a cherubic smile like you have, very much just like you. And he also happened to be, in his weight class, the wrestling champion for the state of California in high school. Gives you an idea. He was fit. And when he wasn't wrestling, at the time off when he wasn't in wrestling, he did rodeo. So that was his off thing. His off season was rodeo. The rest of the time was wrestling. But he had this nice look. When you put a suit on, you can't tell who's what, right? And so he had a suit on, and we all did. And the guys looked us over, and they thought, well, let's see how tough these Americans are. And they thought they'd start with the smallest one. And so they started gripping, did the hand grip thing, and he just turned their hands into mush. And some of them they had some sort of, there was some pipes going down the outside of the building, and one of the guys got a hold of the pipes, and he hung on to it. He just moved his body out, and kind of hung it in the air there, holding onto the stuff. And Rodney said, that looks fun. Let me try that. And so he did. Of course, he did it way better than the guy did. He was just so much tougher than any one of them were. None of them were in his camp. Neither were we. But that's it. I said, well, go on up. So he went up, and we had already lined up the chairs in two semicircles. And they had a whole lot of them. They started coming in, and I started moving around. Now, the Holy Ghost told me what to do and how to do it and how to handle it. So I stood up in front and took charge, and I said, I want you fellows to move down here. And the guys just lulled, and Rodney Condor just kicked the back of their chair, and he said, he said, go over there. And so they went over there. and we just I gave them orders and directions, and they followed the directions because I had my heavy back there, and they already tried him out, and he was not what they. And this was different, and so they were off balance. They came thinking that they were just going to come in bunches, and then they'd all be there, and then they'd take us. And that wasn't what happened. And so there they were in the room, and then I preached the gospel to them for an hour. One whole solid hour. I preached the gospel to them.
Wow.
The closing prayer, and they left. Next week, they came back, same story. Everything repeat. And Rodney Condor was no weaker the next week than he was the last week. And they all came up, and they sat through another hour of gospel teaching, and I gave them the gospel teaching, and they went away again. The third week, they came back. This time, they weren't trying Elder Condor out so much. As a matter of fact, they weren't trying him out at all. They came in, they went on up the stairs, they sat down there. I taught them the third gospel lesson, which just came from the Holy Ghost. So it was nothing else. It was just the Lord speaking through me. And His Spirit was there. And then they left. And then the girls came to us and said, the commentaries have said, you guys are all right. They're not having any problem. They're happy that you're here. And that was kind of exciting. But when they came that first time, though, they were a mob out to do bad things. But the Lord saved us. The Lord had prepared the way before us and took care of us. And of course, I've been in scarier positions than that. I preached the gospel to the Bannock Creek Indian branch.
That's right.
And these guys were nearly as terrifying,
Of course, yeah.
30 young guys in their 20s who were thugs in the neighborhood and running a protection racket and all that stuff. They were nothing compared to looking at the Bannock Indians. me without a cat gun or anything.
Nothing to defend yourself.
So that was it. And then we had so many more experiences. My mission was just one fun thing after another. It was beautiful. It was exciting. There was every kind of possible neat thing in it. And it was good. And I had wonderful people that I knew and met and talked with and became friends with and learned so much from. And the Lord was so kind to me. He just took care of me, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. I don't know how it could be any better. And I was was so thankful, and the Lord did, and that mission has blessed me all my life. And then I went home to Elizabeth, and now things had changed. They now have jet airplanes. That little period of time, it's just that technology can do. And they flew what they called the polar flight, which meant instead of grinding around the Earth from left to right or right to left, it went right over the top, and it's much shorter. It's not that far from San Francisco to London. If you fly north, if you fly up over Greenland and come down over Canada, and you come right down, it's much faster, much shorter. It's because the Earth is a ball; it's not a flat map.
Right.
So if you take a string and put one piece of the string in San Francisco and run the string around to London, the shortest string is right up over that. So we went, and I looked down. It was wonderful. I could see Iceland. We could see Greenland, and we could see the tip of Greenland, and it looks just like it did on maps because we were 30,000 feet in the air. Fantastic. And we came down in San Francisco, and I was waiting, and I was so excited about seeing Elizabeth. And as I got off the plane, I could see her up ahead, and she wasn't nearly as excited as I was. And she looked at me, and then she went back in, and then she'd come out and look, and and talking to other people, and not paying that much attention to me. And then and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm just going to steel myself and get through this because it's going to be awful. Because I was just terribly in love with her, and she obviously was not all that impressed with me. And I thought the families brought her down, the mother and father and Arthur and Susan, and they're now newlywed spouses, and I don't know if I can make this or not. I will just do it. So I pasted on my smile and went up. And then as I just walked in, there was a girl running at me with long hair, and she grabbed me and hugged me, and I realized it was Elizabeth. And I looked at this other girl, and she was almost a dead ringer for Elizabeth, and it was one of my cousins. Red hair, the same kind of facial thing, the same kind of build, the same kind of everything. She could have been almost her twin sister. She looked much more like Elizabeth than any of Elizabeth's sisters did. And that was just one of those funny things. I did kind of hang on to Elizabeth a little longer, and Arthur came over because people were clearing their throats. And he said, Elder, you've got it. That's okay. So it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
But that was the neatest thing in the world, and that beautiful girl was there. And she was all that excited about seeing me, and I was all that excited about seeing her.
That's beautiful.
That was wonderful. Now, have I run out of time?
I think it is time to wrap it up for today, and it's probably time for you to get some dinner. But I've loved this. This is awesome.
Yeah, you just get me rambling on.
I love it. I've loved every second of it, and I already know for sure that if it's okay with you, I'd love to keep doing this after this semester and just keep building it. And I've already got some ideas on how I'll organize it and be able to post it on Google Drive so that your posterity can hear it. And I think I'll post it with pictures so that people can kind of put a face to it as well. Because this is something I want to show my kids too. I want them to be able to hear your voice and hear your stories and learn from you in the closest way possible that I've been able to,
This is an answer to my prayer, because I've known I should write my story, and I have not. I've kind of done little bits of that, but I have not.